Today I'm joined by Alok Kulkarni. Alok is a serial entrepreneur. He's been in this space for 20 years, CEO of Cyara, one of the largest bot and AI and voice testing companies. Alok has a particular insight into this because he's testing a lot of these systems in terms of using AI. The man is still absolutely enthused by the industry and the rate of change. Fantastic conversation with Alok. Hopefully you enjoy it. So, good afternoon or good evening, Alok.
Yeah,
Lovely
good
to meet you.
evening and good morning to you, Oliver.
Thank you. I was going to say it's late, but we were just chatting off air, and you mentioned it's just gone 5 p.m. But it's 8 a.m. where I am, or well, 8:15 if I look at the clock. But I guess you are quite used to working evenings, mornings. You're based out of Melbourne, but
Yes.
I know you have a global footprint, and I know you have investment from Silicon Valley. So give me a little bit of background to yourself. I think quite recently, well, recently in the last few years, you took on perhaps the largest investment for an Australian company ever. Is that right?
That's
Cyara.
right.
So you want to give us a little bit of background to yourself, Cyara, and our listeners, so we can get a flavour of who you are and what you've been doing for a short number of years? Because you look about 25. Even I know you're not 25.
How long you got? It's a I'm not as young as I look. I'm ancient, yeah, I've been in this industry since 1996, really. In the contact center communications industry. And I used to work for NEC. Then from there, I moved to Genesis. And then from Genesis, we came up with this idea for what is a Cyara, right? And Cyara has now morphed into this AI-led contact center customer experience transformation platform, which essentially enables our customers to innovate rapidly and de-risk their platform across all the different communications channels, including bots, traditional voice, email, text, because customers like to communicate across all these different channels. And as you know, it's very hard to do that with a multi-vendor ecosystem, across the cloud, across multiple geographies with agents working from home and using web technologies and video. So it's transformed into that. And on that journey, we've had many iterations, right? So we started in Melbourne, and it was obviously our biggest team at the time when we founded here. And then we grew the company. We had a lot of interest from Europe and US. So essentially in 2006, we started Cyara. 2009, we ended up in the US and in Europe. And then we grew very rapidly. And we got some investment in 2014, 2015. And since then, we grew the company even more. And then we essentially had a major investment from K1 Capital, based out of LA. And it was the largest deal ever done in Australia at the time in 2021. So being proud, obviously, they are owners now. And I think they essentially only invest in B2B SaaS companies. But what it's meant is it's enabled Cyara to continue to grow and expand. And since then, we've done 4 acquisitions. And as we sit here today, we essentially are the largest in Europe. So our footprint in terms of people is the largest in Europe, whereas for the longest time, it used to be a smallest team over there. So it's just interesting how times change. And, we have a very global workforce now. But in terms of the platform, it's been an amazing journey building this out. For me personally and also for the team, because what's really good about the contact center or the customer experience industry is it is mission critical. It is something that makes or breaks companies in terms of the experience that they provide to their customers. And it's really important to get it right. And there's constant change and innovation. So, when we first started, it was just about IVRs and bringing speech into IVR so you could communicate with natural language. And that's where I think we had a partnership with your previous company.
Yeah, we did indeed.
Oliver. So yeah, with SpeechStorm, and I think we revolutionized that. And then since then, there's been other channels, but none more exciting than AI, right? So I think now, as part of the acquisitions, we acquired Bodium and Qbox. And that makes us the biggest chatbot AI assurance platform or lifecycle management for the bots in the world. So that's the current journey, and we continue to invest and grow as a company, and help our customers usher in this new era of AI.
And that's an absolute, because I do recall back the early days when we were working together, and it's a fantastic success story so far. And undoubtedly, the way you're talking, you're actually only partway through the story. And I would imagine the way the industry is evolving, that's very, very true as well, because there's lots of opportunity, both from the vendor side, which we largely operate in, but also from the customer side to take advantage of the technologies. But, you mentioned there being in the industry, I'm not sure if you call it a call center, but well, certainly we used to call it a call center, and then we called it contact center, and now we call it CX.
Yes.
So the name has changed, and I'm just wondering, what do you see has changed, certainly at a technology level, but even from an industry perspective? Because again, I remember, and I think it was 2009, and I've used this before, going into speech tech. I don't know if you remember speech tech that used to run in New York.
Yes, I do remember speech tech.
I'm definitely showing my age here, but that was 2009, I think it was, and at that stage, it stuck to me this day. There was a keynote speech about speech recognition and the tipping point of I think it was the call center industry then, and the tipping point,
yes,
and how speech recognition was going to revolutionize that, and the gist of the story was, and this was promoted by vendors, so the likes of Speechworks, if you remember them, an early iteration of Neon.
Yes, Speechworks, I do remember that.
So this was, the industry is going to be revolutionized, and speech recognition was just going to change it. And looking back, yes, it had an impact, of course it had, but it didn't really change the industry. Are we now, do you think it's the same thing we're seeing with AI, or is this a completely different paradigm that we're looking at here?
Oh, look, I think it's a completely different paradigm. For anybody who's played with GPT-4, and especially the voice one, it is incredibly scary without any training and such, like how it can communicate with you so naturally. And I guess the difference that I see is, in the past, you had to train the bot for all the scenarios that you expected, right? And for a specific task or a domain, you could train it for that particular, task. But the moment you went outside of that, right, it was like you're talking to a dumb machine that doesn't understand anything, right? And it didn't understand human emotion. If you were having a bad day and said some slang or something, it just would throw it off, right? And if it didn't do what it was programmed for, you were pretty much lost. And I think we had the same thing on the natural language side, because you're programming it to understand certain things, and as soon as the language or new technology came out, you had to, I guess there was a heavy lift involved in training these systems and for what it understood. And that's essentially what we're trying to do, isn't it, with customers? We're trying to effectively understand who you are. We're trying to understand what you want, and we want to essentially help you to get that resolved as quickly as possible so that you can get on with your life. And so easy, but it's so hard, right? Because everyone is different. Their environment, the accents, the way they are in the customer journey for the enterprise is different. The touch points are different, so it's very hard for them to do that. But the big change I see with Gen AI is it's trained on the internet, so it understands human empathy and emotion. I mean, there's a lot of debate about that, right? As to, whether it's got bias and all this stuff. But at a very fundamental level, it can understand human emotion. It may not understand the enterprise-specific, standard operating procedures and what's right and what's wrong without a trained model. But the foundational models understand a lot. And so I think we are in this exciting era where Gen AI is going to make a big difference. But it's going to, I think, need to be coupled with conversational AI or SLMs or, machine learning to get the best of both worlds, right? So you can have the empathy and you can have the understanding, but you can also have the specificity and the deterministic behavior of the bots that can help you answer your query, or, give you the information that you need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things there before you started to talk about the technology, about what organizations are looking to achieve, as in, know who you are, try to understand what you're trying to achieve. And again, if I'm cynical, I could say we've been generally within the industry talking about that for, again, 20 years. Personalization, CRM and data, and we've, rightly or wrongly, been promoting those silver bullets that this technology is now going to deliver this, and again, it was maybe natural language, it was NLP, it was open speech rec from Nuance or whatever, all of these technologies, this was the silver bullet. So we're now kind of, are we genuinely at the silver bullet? And I'm maybe being a little bit over questioning, but I think we are at a bit of an inflection point, famous last words. But I guess where you're situated, you have a particular insight with your company in Cyara, because ultimately you're there to try and, I'll simplify it, to break how this technology works, because you're doing your testing cycles, understanding where the holes are, etc. So I guess you have a better insight, and your guys will have a better insight than most people in terms of where those holes are, what's going wrong, what you need to do to address the technology. So give me a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, so what I love about our play in the market is we're not a bot provider, we're not a contact center provider, but we work with technology independent, and we're vendor agnostic, and we're channel agnostic. So we have, I guess, a view across industry, across enterprises, across vendors, across the technology. And what we're seeing is every customer out there has some sort of play with Gen AI. They're either forming teams, they're learning, they're applying it internally. Obviously, there are extreme examples like Klarna, right, who said that they didn't need to hire 700 agents, customer service agents, and still kept CSAT and handle 2/3 of your customer communications. And then there are some who are augmenting the existing agents with bots, but they are not actually putting the bot up front because they're not confident yet. So I think we have two, I guess, different organizations who are very pulled apart in terms of the implementation. But I think the end goal is going to be the democratization of customer experience and the democratization of agents, right? So I see a world where there is zero queues, because each one of us will have our own bot who knows us, who understands our history. I think, and you can put some wrapper around it as to how much of your personal or your company data you wanted to see. But, it's like having your own concierge within an organization. And even the cost of these solutions are coming down so much. The context and the communication is going to be very fluid. And so I think we are coming to a world where it's going to be concierge with, I guess, who's looking after you from a relationship perspective, which is a bot, and that could be living on your app, or it could be in the web page or something like that. But on the other hand, I don't know whether you saw the notification from Apple today, right? Siri is also getting personalized, and it could be, and we've seen this from Google as well, where your bot could be talking to the enterprise bot and just getting the job done. Like, hey, get my agent, talk to your agent, and let's sort this issue out when I need to change my flight or buy something or get more information. And then if it gets to a very critical decision, then hey, I'm going to get involved and get to a human. Now, that might be very futuristic, but I don't think it's very far away, because there is an AI race going on right now. There are billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent on it, and it's essentially something that we're racing towards in terms of super intelligence. So I think understanding and implementing this is going to require a lot of, I guess, assurance. And I think, what I love about being at Cyara is we are the company who are seeing all these bots being deployed. And there are different bots who are at different levels. I think there are organizations at different places with this. There's one customer of ours who's actually built their own LLM, and they're completely automating after call work, right? So there is no agent intervention whatsoever. It's completely automated. There are some that will essentially put a bot up front for the things that they're very confident with. The rest, then get transferred to some, human or maybe a live chat or something like that, right? But effectively, I think the promise of, bots or conversational natural language conversations, completing transactions is not that far away in my view. But there are challenges, right? Because we've seen what happened with the bot that was incorrectly trained, and there was a legal case with one of the airlines in Canada. We've seen what happened with the DPD bot, right, which essentially got tricked into swearing and admitting, I guess, that the service that the company was offering was not so good and they had to take it down. We've seen, bots divulging personal information if you queried them a certain way, and we've seen prompt injection to essentially get security breaches through and all that. So I think the promise is massive, right? Imagine having this concierge and getting, not having to wait and getting your queries answered. But then also, if you're an enterprise, you don't want to be in a situation where you are having to compromise on your security, privacy, and have legal liability, right? So I think those are the areas we are helping with companies to overcome with fact checking, with security, with misuse. But then, as you and I know, just because you have the bot channel doesn't mean that all the customers are going to use the bot. And when the bot doesn't work or is not doing what it's supposed to, you do need to, I guess, migrate to a different channel. And we were just talking about how, with Syndeo, you were in the digital space, but then, now you're looking at voice. And I think that's essentially the journey. We communicate with bots, we communicate with voice, and sometimes, you need both, right? And I think it's going to be a multi-channel journey, maybe including video as well. But all of this needs to be assured to make sure that the delivery of that customer experience is flawless.
I agree, and you raised a couple of interesting points, and I'm not just saying this, but it's something I've been thinking about for quite a few years now, even before the appearance of GenAI. If you think about, I talked at the outset, the call center, contact center, CX. The model hasn't ostensibly changed since the 1960s when we had an ACD, and by that I mean the business model, which is stack them high, sell them cheap, and you're putting, probably the least paid people in your organization in front of your most valuable asset, your customers. And that's been traditionally the model. And I think until organizations start to break that model, which is open up your organization to allow consumers or customers to understand product services, and not necessarily by, we all understand the churn rate within a call center or contact center, and the training, and the reality is a lot of the people within those organizations, they're relatively junior, relatively low paid, and you're putting those in front of what should be your most valuable asset, your revenue generating, your customers. So until the industry, until the organizations start to realize we need to open up our business, and I think the advent, as you rightly pointed out, this sort of concierge type thought, the advent of the technology is now starting to make that possible. What to me will be interesting over the next few years, does the business model follow suit? Because unless we get the business model to follow suit, we as technologists can promote all sorts of wonderful technology, but unless the organizations are saying, well, we're not going to have, 10,000 agents just to handle these. We're actually going to try and have, knowledge workers opened up with the, leveraging the technology to make the job easy so they can then multitask. I think until we get into that, we're not going to see a sea change in terms of the industry.
And you know what? I think part of what's happened is in the past, you needed to minimize your cost because the queries that were, I guess, being put forward to the organizations were repetitive, maybe not as complicated. And so if you had an expensive knowledge worker who could, I guess, answer a lot more complex inquiry or, handle a complex relationship, their time would be wasted because you're not using their skills, right? If you had somebody who could answer very trivial questions, which the machines couldn't answer, right? So effectively, you had to then staff your customer experience team with those low-cost workers because in the end, you're running a business. But now, as machines and bots become very intelligent, and as we know, a bot can be multimodal. It can do video, it can handle images, it can speak, and it can also do text. So you're getting into a situation where, hey, authentication of who I'm talking to can be done by, hey, I want to see your identification. I can do a OTP based on your text with voice and visual to really get the thing. And this can be all done automatically with a bot, right? So those things where you needed humans for, for password resets and all that, which were like, the trivial things before, which we automated, to now even more things as to, where more complicated things like where's my order, where is it stuck at, what's predicted delivery, can I get a refund? That can also be done. So I think, we're going to see the, I guess, the diminishing of those low-cost knowledge workers with high-cost people, high-cost, I guess, knowledge workers who do the things that bots can't do, right? And bots will be able to do a lot more. So I think, we are, I believe, in the most exciting time, not only in the CX industry, but as for humanity with what's going on. And I think, as you say, it's up to the enterprise as to how quickly they embrace it, right? And enterprises have been around long enough to know that, hey, just because a new technology comes along, we're not just gonna go and rush and do this thing, because if you're a large financial institution, large government organization, there's huge ramifications that there's a lot of, I guess, lots at stake. So people tend to be a bit more cautious, and I think that was the original intent of something like a Cyara coming in, where we could help these organizations embrace innovation and bring out new technologies without actually taking that risk on, right? But from what we've seen, the market is evolving rapidly, and we've had a lot of interest in obviously AI solutions and capability. And I think it's going to be a very exciting thing. Having said that, I do think, we are I think we've just come off the hype cycle, right? Because I think, the people, when they use ChatGPT and, Gemini and all that, they go, oh, this, it's going to happen tomorrow. And as we know, it's not that straightforward, right? I think it's still evolving. I think it's still not quite there yet, because it's still a probabilistic model, but I think we're getting better and better. And then as you go to the enterprise, it's not like they'll adopt it as quickly as consumers, so that it has to go through the internal process and all that. So I think that's all happening and all that. But I think pretty soon this is a pivotal moment for the whole CCaaS, UCaaS, well, more CCaaS than UCaaS, I guess, industry, and especially outsourcing and offshoring. It's going to be really interesting how that whole thing changes.
Yeah, I think that whole mix of, well, I was going to say it could be famous last word, UCaaS is dead. I mean, I think anybody promoting or selling UCaaS solely is not at the races anymore. So it's definitely CCaaS, but I think even CCaaS, if you look what's happening, even what Google are doing or what Microsoft announced quite recently, with their new CCaaS offering there. Again, it's been this sort of, how can we combine all of these different technologies, be that a CRM, a customer data platform, data, third-party data, first-party data, AI, customer contact, how can we provide that all into one holistic
It's all coming to one, isn't it? It's all coming to one. Like, I can use the same messaging platform that I use internally, but hey, why can't I use that with customers? We see Zoom, we see Google, we see this hyperscaler like Amazon, Google, Microsoft is now, as you mentioned, with the contact center. So, big tech is getting in. Big tech is investing heavily. Like Amazon's partnered with Anthropic, with Claude, and they've come up with a lot of solutions and all that. And I think there's so much opportunity within the CCaaS space, right? In terms of analytics, in terms of predictions, in terms of, I guess, how you can make things more efficient, and the data that you can glean from, data lakes like Snowflake and all that. I think it's just operating at a very different level and a lot faster to what was possible in the past, right? So I think, and the CCaaS environment gives the perfect human in the loop environment where if there's a query and you've got a bot going out, like, they can actually correct the response and send it out, and that then trains the bot, right? So you're looking at human-based reinforcement, which is a ready-made, I guess, training mechanism. So I think, the utopian future where we are going to have our own concert is a lot closer than we've had in the past.
And just tell me, so you're working with enterprise organizations day and daily, and as you said, particularly the last whatever, and we've all seen that 18 months there's been a lot of hype around Gen AI. I mean, how do you see enterprise? What are the sort of things they're looking at? How are they approaching it? Have we moved beyond the kind of trial pilot phase, start to slowly move this into production type solutions, or I mean, or where do you think we're at, and how are they generally approach? I know it's not one size fits all, obviously.
Yeah. Well, we've seen an explosion of bot providers. We've seen companies trying different, I guess, providers. There's large, I guess, CCaaS providers also offering these capabilities. So I think there's a lot of choice at the moment. I think the race is wide open. You have the traditional or the legacy contact center or CCaaS providers, who've gone to the cloud, and we can name all of them, like Genesys, there's NICE, there's Five9, via Cisco and all that. So everyone's got their flavor. Plus, you got the new hyperscalers coming in and new technology companies coming in, and so I think there's a lot of choice out there, but there's also a lot of opportunity. And as we know, in this space, you can get very specific in terms of building AI-based models for specific verticals. There's a banking vertical, there's a telecommunications vertical, there's an insurance vertical, there's automotive, there's retail. And I think what's happening is there are specialist bots that are coming out for specialist industries. And I think they're also looking at Gen AI to infuse conversation with Gen AI where it makes sense. There's being available through API. So I think that's all happening behind the scenes, because I think it's still very new, right? It's changing by the day, right? So, there's also this hesitation of like, hey, you come something out and it becomes old already. So I think it's a super exciting time, and I think enterprises are trying different technologies, but I don't think we're at a point where, hey, we're just going to replace an agent with a bot. That might be that's happening, but it's sort of a bit like it's in progress, and it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. The question is, does it happen in the next year or two, or does it take the next 5 or 7, right? But I think it's going to be a lot less than the promise of level 5 autonomous driving, right? I bought my Tesla in 2017, and it was meant to go from LA to New York, the next year with all the hardware. It's now 2024 and still hasn't done that. But I think in those situations, we're dealing with real life complicated situations and matter of life or death, right? Whereas in the CX space, you don't have that. And I think, the data is a lot more restricted, so you can put a lot more controls around it. So I think we'll see a rapid progression of the capabilities in this space.
Yeah. And I suppose it's interesting. I remember chatting to, well, I think it was last year, but certainly after the outbreak of Gen AI with Sheila McGee-Smith. And you probably know Sheila. Anybody in the industry knows Sheila. And,
yes, Sheila McGee-Smith. Yes, of course.
Chatting to her, it was one of the industry events, and sort of asking her view, like 2030, around 40% of interactions still be voice, which I kind of, and it's probably, I think 60% still voice. I think enterprises are, again, there's some sort of statistic. I think it's around 60 to 70% of enterprises are still on premise. They're not in the cloud yet. So I think obviously, as we know from a technologist perspective, to take advantage of a lot of these, particularly AI and Gen AI, the only answer is moving to the cloud. Sorry, with a little bit of a light issue here. No worries. That's lack of movement on my behalf of the dimmer. But
well, it's good you've got the efficiency going, right? We don't want to waste any electricity.
Well, this is very true. But what I was saying there, obviously, the technology is fantastic, but until you've overcome some of those things, and it can still work in a voice world, obviously, and it will be multimodal, but until you're starting to make strides towards moving to a cloud-based solution, or at least some data in the cloud, the ability to take advantage of these advances is going to be constrained. And I'm not sure, do you see that within enterprise? Do you see that they are still, I was going to demean some of them. Like I remember chatting not that long ago to an enterprise, and they were asking about Gen AI, and I basically said to them, well, if you can take all the copper out of your switches coming into your contact centers and replace that with IP, that would give you a hell of a lot more savings and advances rather than, so there are still organizations that are TDM, that are copper, that are, there's probably not that many that are copper, like, but anyway, you get the point. I think they still haven't made that leap. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing that progression happening much quicker?
Look, I think moving your premise-based contact center into the cloud for really large enterprises is still on a journey, right? So some of the major vendors have, declared end of life, but they've got end of support in the next, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And everyone's scrambling to determine how they're going to move to the cloud to when do they pick. So I think there's a lot of tenders out there, there's a lot of migrations. So we're seeing a lot of that happen. So I think it is happening. But at the same time, the cloud was very different in the zero interest rate economy than it is now, right? So people are realizing there's costs in the cloud as well. So there's optimization going on there as well. And I think, as you said, like some of these capabilities are just available in the cloud. So take advantage of this. They would have to move to the cloud. So I think there are still some providers who provide hybrid approaches and things like that, but it's inevitable, right? I think they'll have to embrace it. Otherwise, the cost envelope that they have to operate within is they're just going to be uncompetitive. So I think, yeah, the migrations are happening, but it's a big job, right?
Yeah.
Because just imagine, as you said, like, if you're dealing with copper and, those POTS lines and things like that in the past, this thing has been bedded down for decades, right? And you're having to understand what is actually there so that when you move to the cloud, you can offer the same level, if not better, capabilities and service, right? So to sort of migrate that, it's a big undertaking, right? And then, but we've done many of these. We've seen the enterprises, larger and larger enterprises, move across. And I think in maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was like, hey, do you want to move to the cloud or not? Nowadays, everyone knows they have to do it, right? I think it's just people are like burning the boats now when it comes to premise. So, yeah.
I agree with that. I think the burning the boats is a good analogy, and it's a mix between some of the vendors maybe forcing that to a degree, but also, traditionally, yourself I'm seeing large financial services organizations now who traditionally would have been very, very on-prem and very prone for putting anything near a public cloud are now, I think the public knowledge was well announced recently. They've gone to a CCaaS solution, probably one of the largest banks in the US. So I think those sorts of organizations who would have been more traditionally highly conservative about their data are now really, and I think at a senior level, have made decisions that they're moving to a cloud vendor, a mega vendor, and their data is going to reside there. And I think once that decision is made about where their data resides and the trust in a vendor to hold their data, then all the other pieces, including the CX, the contact center, the AI, the bots, all of that is a natural follow. So yeah, I definitely see that happening in the space.
Yeah, and you know what, Oliver, the interesting thing about voice versus non-voice is what we've seen our customers do is we've got bots that are serving both purposes. So it's really just a modality. Whether you want to use voice or data or text, you can choose either, and even go to video. And what we've seen is like effectively the opportunity to, I guess, do what wasn't possible before, right? With more complexity coming into play, because it's a lot easier to do that now than before. So I think voice is here to stay, right?
Yeah.
But how it's delivered is going to be maybe through bots. And there's also web RTC, right? Which is now more generally used, and that's supporting video as well. So for a customer, we did video with voice, and it's only one-way video, because they didn't want the consumer to be on the video, but they wanted the contact center or the CX advisor to be on video. So we have those sort of scenarios as well. I think it's going to be very hard to tell in the future whether you're talking to, a person or a bot. I've had a customer say that to me as well, who is in our industry, who has been a veteran of this CCaaS industry or the contact center industry. And even though they knew they were going to talk to a bot, they could not believe it, to the point where and this is a large insurance institution I'm talking about in the US, and they got their colleagues in to actually listen to it, because they just gave them a scenario in the insurance space, and they were blown away by how much how human like it was, and you really couldn't tell. So
yeah, no, I've seen, I think it was recently OpenAI had a video a couple of months ago of some of their more recent stuff around, particularly with the speech synthesis and the speech rec that they were incorporating, and it's scary, to be honest. Now,
the one that sounded like her, which I think is Scarlett Johansson.
Well, Scarlett Johansson, well, allegedly Scarlett Johansson, allegedly not. But I think it is scarily realistic, and I agree with you. I don't think it's a million miles away either. Obviously, those sort of marketing views are very well curated. Of course they are, and of course there are real world scenarios that are always different. But it's a bit like your scenario in the Tesla. I think we're absolutely moving, and I think you're right then about because traditionally the discussion about voice vis-a-vis digital or text has largely been driven by the organization not wanting to have agents handling voice, because the classical cost of a voice call typically $5, the cost of a chat less than $1. So from an economic perspective, the organization really wants to move consumers away from voice. Consumers themselves don't necessarily want to move away from voice. They want the multimodality aspect of it. And I think if the technology, as we're just saying, the voice recognition and the synthesization of the voice becomes so good, it's very like a human. And if the understanding from the NLP perspective becomes so good, it understands the intent, then I think voice will flourish again, as opposed to perhaps voice diminishing.
Absolutely, right? Because I think it keeps your hands free and your eyes free. So you're using voice. I mean, it's a beautiful modality which is very rich. So why give it? And transmitting voice now is super cheap, right? Like I find my data calls are crystal clear compared to the traditional PSTN lines, even if I'm using my cell phone. So it's like, hey, let's jump on Signal or WhatsApp or Slack, right, to essentially have a conversation, because the traditional cell phone networks are not as crystal clear, or I guess Apache.
True. So give me some crystal ball gazing then, Alok. So I would have loved to ask this question to most people 2 years ago and just see who would have come up with where we are now. But if you cast, obviously we know where we are now vis-a-vis Gen AI and large language models. But if you're looking forward, 2, 5, 10 years, what do you see? How do you see the evolution? What do you see changing? Is there something else around the corner? And I guess you'll probably say, if I could figure that out, I'd be a very rich man. But
well, I think
what do you see?
The interesting thing about this is the race towards AI, to reach general artificial intelligence is so big that I think customer experience just becomes a small part of it, right? But having said that, I think we as humans, I mean, if you go back to the premise of why CX exists anyway, it's to deliver a great customer experience where, if I can give you the information that you need personalized to you at the time you need it, and just get out of the way, I think it's great. So we have a great relationship. And I think that's the promise that's going to effectively ring true. So, in my mind, what we're going to see in the enterprise is, this is my vision or projection, right? Is you'll have a concierge who's a Gen AI based LLM, right? Because they're expensive to run, because they have so many different nodes and so much more compute. So you want to use them sparingly. So you'd use them to, I guess, capture the intent, because you can pretty much work out who you're conversing with and so forth with the Gen AI bot. Once you know what you want to do, then I would pass you on to an SLM-based bot or a conversational AI bot who's been trained in doing very specific things, like maybe doing a refund, maybe adjusting your flight bookings, or any one of those specific scenarios. And then once that's done, you hand it back to this concierge to say, hey, was your query resolved or not? If not, you continue the conversation with another bot, or you get passed on to a live chat or to a human. Effectively, you've got this single mass customized experience, and it's a very rich experience. So I think that's where we're heading, and that will help us reduce the cost of service. So there's no queues. We can get this on demand, and really we've democratized CX. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space, for enterprises, for vendors, for the whole ecosystem, and I think it provides us humans to do bigger and better things, right? Like solve the gravity, I guess, question. Solve the God equation.
Yeah.
One of those things, which we still yet to crack.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. But just as you mentioned there, and I'm conscious of time as well, you were talking about the concierge bot. Do you kind of foresee, and I'm talking about this in technical or solution parlance, I suppose, but a CRM that's no longer within the organization just containing customer data, but a CRM that's housing concierge bots that are aligned to Alok or to Oliver or to whomever, so that we're not actually storing data, we actually have a repository of individualized bots that know who you are, what you are, and can greet and meet, and as you say, then hand that off. Is that a possible direction of travel, where maybe the mega vendors will start to take the data, so it's not just data, it's actually now crystallized?
Well, I think we have some of that right today, because I mean, if you know which modality I'm communicating on and my location, all that, depending on in a Web3 world, how much I choose to share with you, you can pretty much glean if you're authenticated, who you're communicating with. And then, with the data lakes, you have the benefit of looking across the enterprise and beyond to see where you've been historically and what your current situation is, right? Hey, you're on a flight from, from Dublin to maybe London, and this thing. So effectively, in real time, your flight's been delayed, and I've accessed the real-time system to understand where you're at. So you can get into a very personalized situation with that. And I don't think you need to have like a specific bot per person, but the bot instance of the bot, basically, when you initiate that communication, already can have this information at its fingertips, right? Which is very customized. So for you, it'll feel like, hey, I've got a dedicated concierge who's just looking up, because they've got my entire context. So I don't feel like I'm being passed around. And it also sort of builds this rapport, right? So I think it's gonna, I mean, just like that movie Her, right? It's like maybe very too personalized.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it'll be too personalized, but I agree with. I think that'll definitely be the direction of travel in terms of that. Much more heavily personalized. So
because Oliver, don't forget, like, the other thing is we've learned that we want some things private, right? So it's like, everyone thought initially, like, hey, that they're going to be dealing with the bank on social media, they're going to be dealing with all their providers, and people don't want enterprises sometimes in their personal lives. They want them there at the time of need, when they want to buy something, or they want to interact with them because they have a request and they want to know where things are and what they should be doing. But otherwise, there's this privacy they like to protect, right? So I think it's going to be that fine balance between being the creepy bot that's across your life versus, hey, I'm just here to help. But but when you do engage with me, I know everything that I need to know to serve you the best possible extent.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the next topic of conversation I'm going to have with you, Alok, we won't have time to do it today, but is the impact of AI on humanity. So how are we going to use AI to solve those quote unquote God problems? I think
I'd love to do that. It's a
that will be an interesting challenge.
Interest of mine, right? It's like this. There was this Harvard professor on YouTube, right? Who worked out that it was 10,000 times cheaper to get a bot to code than it is for a software engineer, right? So what does that mean for software engineering? Should you do it or not? And effectively, the answer is like, the more things we can build, the better it's going to be. So there's an infinite possible of things that we can build. So if the cost of it comes down, you're just going to be able to build more things. So it doesn't mean that we need less engineers, but it just means what we can achieve as humans is going to be exponential, right, compared to what could have done with our limited biological multi-agent brain. So I think, topic for next time.
I think we'll sign off now. We're up against time, but just reminded me about something I read early this morning with about Elon Musk saying that when he reduced the workforce at Twitter by 80%, saying, I get what the law it is, but ultimately the amount of work expands to fill the amount of people you have. So his view was obviously reduce the amount of people significantly from an engineering perspective, and you can still deliver the maybe AI and bots will actually make that more easily fulfillable.
Yeah, look, I think there's going to be job losses. No doubt about it. Like in certain areas, or people won't hire as many because you're going to get to levels of productivity, like we saw with the Industrial Revolution, right? In the past, but that just means that this workforce is now available to do other things because we are motivated and we have ego and we have a purpose, right? Whereas the machines don't have that, unless there's a bad actor who programs them to do so. They don't live and don't want to die. Whereas for us, we want to, I guess, explore and chart a new territory and be intrepid, right? So I think for us, it's going to be exciting to go in that direction while we don't have to do this menial tasks anymore, right? Like who wants to do the laundry every day when there's a machine to do it?
Let's not go there. That can be a touchy subject at times.
I know that is a touchy subject. That is a touchy subject. Waiting for one of those bots.
Alok, we're up against time. Listen, I really appreciate it. I'm definitely going to get you back on in the next series. We're going to talk about those big God problems. But listen, for now, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your insights. Brilliant speaking to you again. Take care, and we'll touch base in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. It was a pleasure.